Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is John Crone, the president of the Osterville Association. Thank you for coming to our February meeting. We've got a full agenda tonight, so we'll get right to it. We have a secretary's report that the board received. Is there any edits, changes, or additions anybody has to the January 3rd minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the January 3rd, 2023 minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, moving on. Treasurer's report, Al, okay?
Okay, so as of today, our main checking account, we have $3,934.21. In our savings account, which we're finally earning some interest on, you know, after 10 years of earning nothing, we're actually earning some money on this thing here. But we have $2,634.74, and our Robert Smith Fund, which is what we use to give gifts out and grants and donations, the $23,475, no outstanding bills or anything right now. So it's about 30,000 between the three accounts.
All right, pretty slow time this year. All in favor of accepting Al's, any questions for Al? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the treasurer's report for February 7th, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, moving on. OBPA, Gail Nightingale.
Hey. Our 16th annual chocolate festival will be held this Saturday, February 11th, throughout the village, with the main event, the baking contest, being held here at the Osterville Library. Judging will take place at 12 noon with free samples of all the entries immediately following. Many chocolate or Valentine events will take place in the shops. Our thanks go to Carol Williams, who has organized the Chocolate Fest for us. Thank you letters for our Christmas charities donations have been received from the Salvation Army and the Cape Cod Times Needy Fund. This was again organized by Bruce Williams, and we collected a total of $6,000 in donations for the two organizations. Our winter cocktail party is being planned. It will be held at the Osterville Historical Museum this year on March 21st. Invitations will be sent out. This is being held in lieu of our March breakfast meeting. Our next breakfast meeting will be our annual meeting in June. We need to start working on the OVA OVA scholarship. If you know of any high school senior that lives in Osterville, please encourage them to apply. Plans for Village Day to be held on Saturday, July 15th are beginning. We already have the parade band signed up. The theme this year is summer fun. It's not too early to start thinking about entering a float or group in the parade. All are welcome. Say Dawson's Beach might put a nice float in that. Respectfully submitted.
Okay, next on the agenda is Safe Greater Dawson's Beach, an update by Suzanne Connell.
Thanks, John. I'm Suzanne Conley of Save Greater Dawson's Beach. Most of you know about our very successful meeting on January 17th. Unfortunately, many folks were turned away because of the size of the crowd. We felt pretty bad about that. Our numbers, our supporters continues to grow in leaps and bounds. At the moment, we have 2,934 signatures on our petition to prevent the use of Dawson's Beach for cable landings by Avangrid Renewables. We have, I looked this afternoon, we now have 580 people on our Facebook page, which is a number I never even anticipated, but it's wonderful. And it's how we keep our supporters updated. We've ramped up our letter writing campaign by contacting the governor, the lieutenant governor, the new climate chief of Massachusetts, and all the legislative leaders like Karen Spilka and Ron Mariano.
Listen to mine.
We had a very good long meeting with Michael Holcomb from the mayor's office, and we emphasized the existing alternatives to the Dowsers Beach plan. And yesterday we met with Senator Warren's regional coordinator and her Washington-based energy and environmental advisor. In both meetings, we presented the reasonable alternatives to the Dowsers Beach plan. We've fully participated in the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's 3 public hearings over the last week and a half, and we testified at each. We'll be submitting a comprehensive response in writing, by the public comment deadline of February 21st. With respect to the ongoing NEPA review, Avangrid is being required to submit a draft environmental impact report and explain why Dowses Beach went from being less preferable for cable landings in an earlier ENF to its preferred landing site. They're also required to provide much more analysis of alternative sites. I'm thinking the significant pushback from residents of Barnstable has been recognized by NEPA, and that to me is very encouraging. As you know, Avangrid is planning to work on the aquifer on Valentine's Day. I wrote to all town councilors, and for a number of given reasons, I asked that this work be disallowed. I posted a copy of that email on Facebook. So far, I haven't heard from any of them. Finally, in a meeting between Sage Greater Dowses Beach and the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista Neighborhood Association, two of their wonderful representatives have joined us tonight, Dave and Greg, so thanks for being here. We met with them a couple of weeks ago, and we decided to form a coalition of civic associations and community groups opposed to unplanned, chaotic, invasive, and entirely unnecessary use of Nantucket Sound beaches to land cables and the significant disruption of seaside villages to run these cables through to substations they plan to build. We're in the process of inviting many of these groups to join us. In numbers, there is strength, especially when trying to get public officials to listen to the people who elect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I want to say Suzanne and the group have done a yeoman's job here, and I've been involved, a number have been involved with her with
You're listening to my
conversations we've had recently with Julian Sears' staff and also Elizabeth Warren's staff about these issues about plan versus generally a lean line approaches to landing power lines on our beaches. With the two gentlemen from Falmouth Heights that I've had the pleasure to meet probably 6 or 8 months ago. They sent us a letter, and I want to read that letter to the Osterville Village Association. It says, "Dear John, 248 years ago, one if by land, two if by sea, was a rallying cry of a nascent commonwealth, and nation alerting patriots of an invading force of an imperial empire. Now to the south shore of Cape Cod that is under the threat of an invasion by huge high voltage, 250 to 300,000 volts, electric sea cables from substantially foreign-owned wind farms, 30 to 40 miles south of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. These sea cables are not what one might see on the street or even in high-tension overhead wires. Rather, they are
Recording in progress.
diameter. There will be 2 or 3 such cables at each onboarding location. The developers propose to undermine our public beaches, local residential streets, and in some cases, parklands. 4 beaches have already been targeted by the first 4 developers: Covell's Beach, Craigville Beach, Greater Dowses Beach, and Falmouth Heights Beach, all of which are gems of their respective communities. The work at Covell's Beach is already under construction, and the remaining 3 are still pending state and local permitting. To be clear, as a coalition, we recognize the need for renewable clean energy and do not oppose offshore wind generation of the same. However, we do oppose the apparent indiscriminate individual placement of their onboarded sea cables through densely populated historic residential communities under pristine public beaches, parks, or estuaries. We do promote a well-planned, coordinated regional approach, which has been the recommendation of multiple professional studies. The Brattlebrook being one of those that we've already shown here. Such a planned approach would result in the sea cables being routed to commercial, industrial sites on New England mainland in an efficient, cost-effective manner near to where the energy is ultimately destined. We are reaching out to you now to solicit your organization to join our proposed coalition of associations to oppose the invasion of these cables in our residential neighborhoods on Cape Cod. We are fighting an uphill battle, and there is strength in numbers which will assist in our making our voice more effective. If you're interested in joining us or require further information, please contact us at either of the emails listed below. We are hanging 2 lanterns in the bell tower. I received this about a week and a half ago, and this is one of the ideas that was thrown around in Suzanne's group. And I really believe it is important that those of the expected communities that are coming here, that with these landing cables, which is, we're only the first few, there could be 17 or 18 coming up and down the coast of Massachusetts, that we need a voice that's together and lobbies the appropriate state agencies into a more favorable approach. And we believe the planned approach, which was one of the things that Brattle Group came forward, was that they would develop one line in a environmentally sensitive area, or not, you know, at least environmentally sensitive. And then all these cable groups that are putting these wind farms would all hook up out to sea instead of hooking up on our beaches and through our villages. I think that's very important for us to consider. And I think it's a great strategy in going forward. We talked about this specifically with Julian Sears' office in the last couple of weeks, and also this past week with Elizabeth Warren's office. And I'd like the OVA board to actually discuss this, and I'm asking that we sign on to this coalition as a co-signee and have our village heard in this push to have a more sensible approach to cable landings. So I'm just wondering if there's any discussion of the board that would like to discuss it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Good, Paul.
Yeah, cool. I think it is a compelling idea. I think it's really the presentation, Heather, that I think you partially made was the Ambaric/Brattle Group, right? Presentation in regards to having a bunch of these offshore cables try to be centralized in a spot off of landfall, so that you have a dramatic pressure downwards on the number of landfalls and they're consolidated offshore. I think there's a ton of merit to that idea. And I've only seen that presentation. I know one or two people at Ambaric. I know one or two people at Brattle, and it does seem like that's something that has to be seriously considered. I don't, however, know about the practicality of the timing in regards to the 2030 roadmap law. That is the benchmark that we're trying to hit, which is the reduction of carbon emissions to 50% of what they were in 1990. And so I think that this idea has merit and is like the type of thing that this organization has brought to the conversation. That's super helpful. But I do wonder about the applicable timing if the present administration in Boston wants to stay committed to the law that's passed in the state about hitting carbon emissions, which means we have to have 5,600 new megawatts of effectively offshore wind to get the carbon emissions down to the number that is sought. So, you know, I think being part of a coalition that's talking about this particular idea is totally valid and good. I just don't know at this view that I have presently about its applicability to the program of offshore wind that we're presently dealing with. I don't know if that makes sense.
The state's never been on time with anything. So why start now?
This is one thing we did talk to with both these groups about the hard and fast deadline in that there may be some legal action taken by these groups at some point, which could push this off a couple of years anyway. Okay, so we see that as, of course, that they're going for that hard and fast 2030, but we've made the argument that we believe that it's better to do it right. Okay, and the other thing I've made a point of saying a number of times is that we're adamant against what they're going to do here in Osterville and at Dawson's Beach, and same thing with Centerville, same thing with Falmouth Heights. Okay, we think there are better ways of doing that. So we're going to fight hard for it. But there could be a politician who can step forward and say, hey, listen, and I've said this before, I said most of the opposition would evaporate if they decided to go to this plan route. Okay, we wouldn't fight that. Okay, we understand wind power is coming here. And this all free-for-all like Oklahoma Sooner thing where everybody's throwing their lines everywhere in Cape Cod, in Nantucket Sound, is not an environmentally friendly way to do it. It's also not environmentally friendly for our beaches, for our villages. So we think it's, we think it's within reason for them to maybe take a look at that date. Whether they will or not, that's a different story. But I would argue for the OVA board to sign on to this coalition to see where we can go with it. And I still believe that there'll be a lot more, when a lot more of these projects are proposed, a lot more communities will be in the same spot. So,
John, I think as a board member, if I put aside my own view, which is not relevant, or I put aside the views of the board members, I think signing on would reflect the sentiment that came, the overwhelming sentiment that came in the survey that you endeavored to do. And the subsequent affirmation of that survey by the board. And it also would be consistent with the OBPA's position.
I agree, Heather, on that. Good point.
go ahead, Gail.
I just want to say the OBPA, I can't speak to them because we haven't taken an official vote on joining the coalition. There's a couple of our members here that hopefully I think would agree with me, that I think it's a good idea in strength, you know, numbers and strength. And we are not interested in having these cables go right down our business district. And anything we can do to prevent that, I think it's a good idea. I will bring it up to our next steering committee meeting to get an official vote of our OBPA steering committee. But, and I will let you know then, but I can't imagine we would vote against it. Ellen, you're one person here. You felt that, you know, we've certainly shown an interest in not having the cables go through our business district. So, thank you.
Any other comments for the board? I'd like to put forward a motion, we have a motion put forward that we sign on to the coalition that includes the groups that are already in the Victor Association, Save Greater Dowsett Beach, possibly the OBPA. So put forward a motion that we join the coalition as a board of directors.
Second,
You have any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
One last bit I would just add to it is that some of the appeal, right, of an idea like this is consolidation. If you listen to the conversation about consolidation, though, then at the end of the day, it has to still land somewhere. And a lot of the conversation about where it might potentially land could also bring up the other side of the equation, which is sort of an environmental justice portion of the conversation. Namely, the overwhelming concentration in certain portions of the Commonwealth in which a lot of infrastructure gets placed because the local community doesn't have some version of the wherewithal to reject it somehow. And so it's a part of the conversation is like, people bring this up and it's like, this makes sense. Send it towards New Bedford, send it to a place primarily on the greater Buzzard Bay, south coast of Massachusetts. And there might be some appeal for those communities, but I think there will also be a bunch of folks who are like, we're sick of getting things sort of dumped on us here. And so I would say that is a second part of the conversation that's also part of this larger Anbaric, Rattle, coordinated landing conversation that just, people need to be aware of.
Can I say,
Yeah,
that's a good, really good point. One of the things that happened in the past few years is an Office of Public Participation at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that is actually so far staffed by New Englanders, and it's helping the public in those communities engage, teaching them how and supporting them. And I think Mass, compared, along with some other states, but maybe even more than some, is working to help people be advocates. So I put that on the table as kind of a nice force out there that at work right now
Gotcha.
in those communities.
All right, cool.
Yeah. And John, you can't see hands, but I see Councilor Ludke's hand up.
Okay, Betty, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to piggyback on what Paul Cusack just spoke about in terms of the environmental justice communities. We had a Zoom the other day, the Hyannisport Civic Association that I joined in on and Paul did too. And one of the things we talked about is the first wind landing that's already landed at Covels and is snaking its way up. They are building a substation right beside the existing substation in Independence Park. And wouldn't you know that substation and the new one are right beside one of the larger affordable housing complexes in Hyannis area. So I think Paul's point is well taken, that, that's a consideration that, hey, you guys let this one go through because who cares? The substation is right beside the affordable housing. So, I mean, he brings up a very good point that needs to be considered as you go forward. But, I've spoken in support of the planned approach. I think it makes sense. And I hope the state of Massachusetts does look at a pause to consider it. But the environmental justice is absolutely a huge, huge issue. It's going up in Chelsea right now. There's a big issue going on up there with the substation. Mayor Wu is very engaged with it, and it's something very important to take under consideration.
Thanks, Betty. Appreciate it. Anybody else have any comments? Right here, have a comment? Seeing none?
John, could I just make one quick comment?
Go ahead.
The gentleman raised some very good points. You summarized the whole situation very well. And the environmental justice certainly is an aspect that is something we have to deal with. We're promoting taking cables to already existing industrial sites. We're not putting it in a new minority neighborhood. That's not our desire in any way, shape, or form. But by the same token, the reverse is you don't take a populated residential community and just put it there just for the sake of justice. That doesn't make any sense at all. The other aspect, talking about the state getting a little over its skis as far as 2030 deadline, which was an arbitrary date that Baker set. He didn't even consult, in my understanding, or with the New England grid. And the New England grid can't handle it at the moment. They've got to rebuild the system entirely. And what are we talking about bringing the cables into the Cape here? The infrastructure that has to be built, the substations, each and every one of these wind farms coming in has to build a huge substation. And ours is going to run eight miles through this town, past 2 schools, businesses, through our residential community. And it happens to be going into a lot on Thomas Landers Road at the moment. And the description of the substation was such that the neighbors up there said, "Oh my God, this is crazy." It's being built right over a tainted aquifer already. And if they have dielectric oils being spilled there, and then they had to build a berm all the way around the substation. And one of our experts got up at our meeting the other night and said, "Well, you know why they're building the berm, don't you?" And we said, "Well, not really, to retain the spill or whatever." And he said, "No. Have you ever seen a 15 megawatt transformer explode? It's basically for protection for the neighbors." There's so many aspects to it. And I think the date and a planned approach would allow the infrastructure to be built, the grid to be ready for it. There are existing industrial sites. The canal power plant that's just been abandoned and bought by a group of investors.
Yeah.
They bought it for exactly this reason, to connect with the wind cables that are coming in. In our particular case, Mayflower Wind, which has now changed their name to South Coast Winds. They were originally going to bring all 2,400 megawatts into Falmouth. And they then decided to take the first 1,200 to Brayton Point, which is the old coal-fired plant in Somerset, which we applauded. We said that's perfect. That solves exactly our problem, half of it anyway. That's exactly where it belongs. And they're having their own problems right down there now with the community to get those cables in across Rhode Island, Whidnick Island, et cetera, up to Somerset. But I think the whole planned approach, and even if we have to postpone that deadline a little bit, the state should be thinking along those lines. Oh, yes.
You're right in the first place. Right. Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion, we have a seconded. All in favor of joining the coalition, say aye. You opposed? Thank you. Next up, what's in the wind? Heather Hunt, who's one of our board members, is going to summarize some issues involved with the overall picture of what's happening in Osterville Village and the town.
It is not. Oh, wait.
There it
From beginning. Alrighty. Yeah, I can. All right. So I'm gonna first apologize for the few people that were here at the last meeting, because there's gonna be some dislocation here. John and some others asked if I would sort of repeat the presentation and then add some items that have happened in the interim. So it's changed just a little bit. It's on the long-ish side. I'm gonna try to go fast to leave time for discussion. And then Jen, others, weigh in and all that. So at the last meeting, when we discussed planning around density zoning for Osterville, we said at the beginning of the meeting, and it's true tonight too, that our objective is to encourage everyone to have facts in the debate around planning and zoning, and not sort of hypothesize about what might be, but really look at what people are saying and doing and what's going on in town hall and be really fact-based. I said at the last meeting, I'm just going to say it again. A bunch of years ago, our town manager challenged citizens to be engaged, and some of us took him up on that. And when we do, we are too often told, there's a misinformation train running around Osterville and things are hyperbole and all this stuff. That's just untrue. So this is an effort to say, our town needs to be responsible for the words coming out of the paid professional staff at our town hall. And if we can't take their words to the bank, the problem isn't us. Okay. So I want to start, last time I ended just with a little word about the housing crisis. I want to start with that because it's critical. I don't think anyone debates or questions whether there's a housing crisis to solve on the Cape. It's real. We can do better, however, than turning density decisions over to developers by just sort of blowing open zoning. We can also do better than government just sort of telling us that it plans to densify our neighborhoods, our streets, our villages, and our communities. Because someone in town hall thinks that where you bought your home is a burden, because the Cape Cod Commission wants density, or because some housing advocates argue that we can just build our way out of this, which I would, question whether that's a viable theory, right? I put a note here that our housing advocacy organization here, HAC, is often I call it a front. They like to call it a partner with folks who are economically interested in density. Those are the realtor lobby. I actually went to law school based on my mother as a realtor, so I love myself some realtors. But the realtor lobby is a strong advocate for anything goes zoning, and it's HAC's close partner. Also partnered with builders and the chamber. So I encourage you to take really close looks at what's coming out of our housing organizations here on the Cape and who's funding those activities. I think we should also know we can do better than just changing zoning because it's sort of free. So I just want to sort of start with that. At the last meeting, we focused on two maps, one of which is new since we spoke about it in January. In January, we took a look at the Cape Cod Commission density map. That's the one rimmed in blue that outlines the Community Activity Center in Osterville. There's a similar map for Hyannis and Barnstable Village as well. In that map, it's where the Cape Cod Commission encourages zoning changes for mixed use and multifamily density development. In the Cape Cod Commission's view, Osterville for zoning purposes is the same as Hyannis and Barnstable Village. The other map that has sort of emerged in town presentations since January is the one with the purple dots. I put my own purple dots in here. I'm calling them density dots when they're used by the town. Those showed up in a draft housing production plan that was presented to the Housing Committee in January of 2023. The map has a Cape Cod Commission seal on it, so you'll often see the sort of interplay between the entities. It seems that town planners, from scrolling through what was presented at the Housing Committee, are sort of adopting that map as its own, although that's never been, to my knowledge, sort of officially adopted, discussed, or anything else with the community. So first, we just want to focus folks' eyes for awareness on the Cape Cod Commission Osterville map. It's about 390 acres in and around the Osterville Village Center. As I noted, the Cape Cod Commission thinks current zoning needs to change in these so-called community activity centers to increase density and usher in mixed use and multifamily zoning by right. In the Housing Committee presentation that I mentioned in January of 2023, Barnstable Town Planners sort of expanded that 390 acres in the draft housing production plan that's yet to be issued. It was just sort of presented to the committee. It called out the half-mile radius around the village center as ripe for density development and zoning changes. And it threw Centerville in the mix, which had not been in the mix at the Cape Cod Commission. I don't know the basis for that. So my question is, have you ever been asked your view as to whether, and if so, that perimeter around Osterville Village ought to be densified? Do you want to change zoning in this footprint to usher in multifamily, more height, double deckers, and otherwise sort of leave density decisions? I'll talk more about that later, to developers. Second, I just quickly want to review and ask you to listen to what our town planners and the Cape Cod Commission say about our current zoning, our current single family zoning. It's in the bullseye. I don't know how many people here know that it's considered broadly by planners a problem to solve. So in the town planners' words, single family residential zoning is a burden to the community. That was said in the very same meeting where the realtor lobby said, oh, if only we could do away with single family zoning, everything would be sort of solved here. There's an alignment of comments at that meeting. Our town planners also said that the ADU proposal was a baby step to pushing back on the legacy of single family residential zoning. The Cape Cod Commission declares that our current zoning is broken. So next I want to look at sort of what the barrier has been to changing this burdensome single family zoning. It's largely been considered the lack of sewer infrastructure. Over and over the years, town planning staff has said, let's start with density zoning changes in Hyannis and move it elsewhere, specifically to Osterville and Barnstable Village. At this point, density zoning in downtown Hyannis has now happened. The council approved that change last week. In response to a question about, whether this is intended only for Hyannis, the town planning staff said just what they've been saying for many years, which is this particular proposal is about Hyannis. Well, of course it is. There's a map of Hyannis and its zoning changes in Hyannis. It wasn't responsive to the question. No one's ever questioned whether the Hyannis zoning proposal was meant for Hyannis. Of course it was. The broader question is the intention and plan to move that density zoning elsewhere. I'm going to go fairly quickly here. So at this point, downtown Hyannis is sewered. The town had proposed zoning changes to increase density. That's now been adopted as of last week to do what had been in the staff's words to the housing committee to leave density up to the developer. There's a video of that on the town website. If you took the time to listen, you'd hear town staff explain that the point of it is to leave density decisions up to the developer, and those would be dictated by parking, be less restrictions, and everything would be by right. The town's consultant said to expect the housing prices in those homes made possible by increased density to be at the high end of the market rate. Query what that does for our affordable housing needs. All of those units made possible by density can be Airbnb'd anytime, all the time, free for all there. And the consultant said, at some point, this town is actually going to have to deal with the housing problem because this is going to deepen it. Nothing to solve it. The second paragraph here is just a very quick note that the town planning staff had worked on this proposal for many, many years with economic, financial interests, not residents. Process drives outcomes, so I kind of focus on process. That went on out of the public view, no, presence on the website. People were using their home Zooms. So even if you had an interest, it was really impossible for citizens to even listen to what the business interests were saying about this over the first few years as it was rolling along. before it was unveiled to the public. So a question, because I'm going to do my purple dot here every time, is, how many of you think leaving density up to developer in this community is a way to meet this community's actual needs? I made this because I was aggravated by the process. I'm not going to spend time looking at it, but there is another deck up on the OVA Today website. This just shows, that the Realtor Lobby introduces this topic in 2018. It rolls along for years with business interests. The realtors pay for HAC to train. So you have a nice nonprofit veil over the training for public officials to come learn about it. Funded by the realtors whose, priority is transactions, right? It's not housing, it's transactions. And then you'll see in the red where the public process began. So I'm a little obsessed with the little map because it just underscores, the sort of intensity of the focus on business interests before residents. Okay, I want to talk just a little bit about what we've heard from our town hall about the intent to move density zoning to Osterville, and I'll add in Barnstable Village. In 2019, we heard that the project right now is focused on the growth incentive zone in Hyannis, which is a portion of Hyannis. But our goal has always been to be able to replicate this in other areas. That would be our goal, would say, okay, absolutely. Now let's replicate this in the center of Marston Mills, in Osterville, and Barnstable. We'll move it. Again, another year, but more of the same. An explanation in response to a question that this density zoning is a more, quote, modernized approach to zoning. And it could be very effective in our other village centers. If we can find other opportunities to bring these, quote, modernized tools to other places in Barnstable, town planning staff thinks it would be beneficial to the overall regulatory scheme and development townwide. Later still, in a written report, well, this was in minutes written, the town planner reported to our council that it had been working with the Cape Cod Commission on this density zoning framework for community centers like Osterville. So I query again with my purple dot. Does that sound to you like a misinformation train running around Osterville? Next, I think we should look at what the Cape Cod Commission says about zoning in Hyannis, Osterville, and Barnstable. As I noted, it views all three as the same for zoning purposes. So in its view, those three villages are ripe for zoning change. One, to allow higher density and multifamily housing. One, to have inclusionary zoning bylaws. And then this last sentence we talked a little bit about last time, I don't fully understand what it means. Dimensional regulations that have us walk around more, I think. So I query, how many of you, weighed in on the Cape Cod Commission's community designation? How many of you understood its zoning implications? Yeah, how many was ever asked? So anyway, the small print here is from the Cape Cod Commission. I just sort of pulled out how it defines a community activity center. Again, it's a lot of the words that's, compact, walkable, live, walk, play, dense development. If you're interested in that, it actually would be worth your time to sort of go to the Cape Cod Commission and pull these documents up and read for yourself. I am curious about how many people here had any say into whether Osterville should be a Cape Cod Commission target for density development. I'm going to go back, and I'm a little bit of a broken record on this one too, and just take a look at the connection of all of this to the town staff decision early on, before any council or any community conversation about the local comprehensive plan, to say, we're done with village plans. In the 2010 local comprehensive planning process, that's when village residents produced village plans. This village said, thanks a lot. We like our zoning as is. Great, leave it. We've got, a really sensible development pattern here that's, walkable in the village center, a good amount of density, probably more density than other villages around it. Everything kind of works here for residents, so leave it, thanks. So my purple dot, again, is how many of you were ever asked whether you wanted to abandon village plans in this planning cycle? I went and pulled back the prior strategic planning map for residential development that was fed into the 2010. That's the last local comprehensive plan. Then I put a little circle around what's now full of purple high density dots. The key, which is hard to see, is that was targeted for low density development. So a question for you all is, since then and today, have you been asked whether you want to move from low density residential development to high density residential development where you bought your home? So that was then. In the current planning cycle, the town planner announced that the town would move away from village planning. Again, before anybody talked about it, before community conversation, before the council had not one word about it. And I really appreciate the folks who watch all these meetings and help me sort of provide this information, because it's certainly not all me. For the first time, it was announced that village plans, I think this might have been in response to a question, village plans would be an output of the town plan and not an input. And when pressed for the rationale for that, the answer was sewers. So a question is, how many of you were asked whether you're capable of sort of thinking through the fact that there'll be sewers possibly, and whether you're capable of thinking about planning in connection with the sewers that the town's going to ask you to pay for? This is just to sort of tie back what I just said to actual quotes, so I don't get accused of the misinformation train driving. In the town planner's words, the objective is to align the local comprehensive plan process with the wastewater management plan. And that necessitates that the town zoom out from the villages and look at infrastructure. If there are identified a need to update those village plans, I anticipate that being an outcome. So another purple dot, right? Has anyone been asked whether they would like village plans to be an outcome instead of an input to the next local planning process? I want to tie this over a little bit to the current wind conversation. I want to start with what everybody sort of starts with, is that there's probably very little opposition to clean energy, right? The deep community concern that we've heard from others about the inappropriateness of douses does not equate to opposition to clean power. And I think the same is going to be true on the density side. If somebody is concerned about density development, that does not equate to any presumption about views of clean power. A question though is it a coincidence that the town, unlike, I believe, and others from other towns can correct me, every other town on Cape Cod actually invited developers to come run high voltage infrastructure, right? Up on our beaches and through our town centers. Is it a coincidence? In the case of Osterville, the town is also now encouraging a developer to run the power infrastructure right to the village center, where if you read prior material from that developer, there was an objective to actually, I think the first spot was Kelmis, somebody can correct me on that, as an identified landing spot.
They looked at it, but
And
didn't
said
want to go there because of the cables that run to Nantucket.
And in the filing with the state, it also said that the effort was to avoid business centers, high traffic areas, and densely developed residential areas, which is exactly what now the town is saying, go do that here. And remember now that the basis for tagging Osterville as this high priority density development in the draft housing production plan map, that the purple dot map, that has the Cape Cod Commission seal on it, that the town seems to be adopting as its own in that draft plan is, and I'm quoting, wastewater infrastructure, activity centers, and development potential. This again is just to affirm that I'm not making things up. In the first local comprehensive plan meeting, this is just an excerpt from the meeting report where the town planner said that the main thing that propelled her forward to make that committee and move away from the prior process was sewers. There's this incredible implications for potential induced growth. I'm going to spend just a minute now talking about the town planner's presentation of the draft housing production plan to the housing committee. It has echoes of the Cape Cod Commission's regional plan call for density zoning around Osterville Village. I'll note that that plan has not been released for public comment yet. It was shared with the housing committee and sort of scrolled on screen so you could read it. In that plan, the town planners identify as a strategy density zoning changes in and around Village Center, just like the Cape Cod Commission. It says that would be consistent with the local comprehensive plan, which was confusing to me, and we'll talk about that. The draft included maps, which again were funded by the Cape Cod Commission, that tag Osterville as high priority for that density development. Again, it suggests that those maps are somehow driving development here. So, but wait now, because if the point is to be consistent with the local comprehensive plan, well, we don't have a new one yet, right? Density zoning in and around Osterville isn't called for in the prior one. If you recall, there was a map that says, no, this is low density as an objective. So the language in blue here is lifted from that presentation to the housing committee that says, you look at what was just done for multi-unit and mixed-use development in Hyannis and consider amendments to zoning use and dimensional requirements within a half a mile of the village centers, Hyannis, Barnstable, Centerville, Osterville. So this was a development that sort of came about since we last spoke in January. It seems in this plan that the town planner sort of has to be projecting what the next local comprehensive plan will say when drafting, we need to comply with that thing that isn't out yet. And again, this is just to share with you sort of that there's this, what I just said is valid and true, right? These are excerpts from the housing committee presentation. The one on the left simply details what I just said to you, and the one on the right shows the town's use of this sort of purple dot map that tags Osterville as high priority. And it also points to wastewater infrastructure as a basis for sort of giving that high density priority. Okay, next on to the local comprehensive plan. The local comprehensive plan, and Jen can speak to this, really provides the community an opportunity to set your own vision of what you want this community to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. There is no requirement as a matter of law that our town plan conform to the Cape Cod Commission regional plan. You will often hear public officials at towns like, oh, you got to comply with that. No, it's actually not a requirement. It's a little bit of a fiction or sort of a myth that maybe takes on a life of its own. So when you hear, talk about the need to comply with the regional policy plan, I would question for you, it's you who have the opportunity to set your own vision and think about, whether or not you actually weighed into the Cape Cod Commission vision. How many here did that? Just a quick word on what the town, and when I say town, it should mean you, get for conforming to the Cape Cod Commission regional plan. The language is hard to read, but generally you get some planning and technical assistance. You get help with regulatory agreements where developers come in and sort of get around zoning by striking a deal. That is a lot of the way that sort of what's happened in Hyannis has happened, sort of a lot of regulatory agreements to kind of end run the zoning code. I think citizens should consider, do you think the benefits that flow from conformance to that plan give you value? And should the town follow that? I'm curious if anyone's ever asked you whether you wanted our town plan to conform to the Cape Cod Commission's vision of the land. Or whether you believe, there's value in whatever it is that we get from conforming to that plan. So last, just a quick word on sort of engaging. When the town releases its housing production plan, it would be in your interest to sort of read it and send in comments. It would be in your interest to pay really close attention to the LCP and share your views with people on that committee and with our counselors. It would be in your interest to talk to your counselor about whether you think our LCP needs to conform or should conform to the regional policy plan and the density zoning that the Cape Cod Commission wants for Osterville. It would be in your interest to sort of help spread the word. We don't really have media here anymore to do that. So it's up to residents like us just to share what we know with each other. And then finally, if you have information about anything that I said that might be untrue with facts or data or reports, we always welcome them so we can come back and try to bring more facts next time. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments out there?
Yeah, I have one. World do these guys live in here? They realize Massachusetts lost 25,000 people last year. They're going to lose at least 50,000 this year with the millionaire's tax. All these people to buy all these Osterville houses. Well, they're probably down in Florida right now. Why do they want to punish like the wealthier people in Osterville even more? Because chances are they're in the process of leaving Cape Cod right now. What world do these guys live in?
Yeah, chances are. I don't know where they live. I will say, I overheard people talking too loudly at the post office today about the town's interest in going out for some sort of debt override, and I'm not very, conversant in that. But the dialogue was, why would we do that and give more money when where it's driving is this density that we don't actually want? So.
Go ahead, Mr. Baxter.
By way of introduction, my family has summered in Osterville since the mid-30s, and I decided to move up to our house, our cottage, 2 years ago after my mother passed away. I just want to know this Cape Cod Commission, which seems to have the central authority of a malice operation. Are they elected? They're not elected, right?
Are they elected or
I think they're
appointed?
appointed.
They're appointed.
That makes sense.
So it would behoove the people of the voters in this room to ask your representatives whether they support the operations of the Cape Cod Commission, what goes on at the Cape Cod Commission, because they're the people who are supposed to be responsible to you, not some centralized committee that you don't elect. So make that a part of, I'm not trying to lecture, I'm just saying, when you make your voting decision, say, what's up with the Cape Cod Commission? They seem to be making plans, and that seems to be your job in connection with us, the citizens. So I would encourage you just, every time there's an election, to figure out where that candidate stands vis-a-vis these kind of centralized planning ideas, whether it be with energy or whether it be with, housing.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the Cape Cod Commission is I'm a little nerdy and I read a lot. And it's really hard for people to engage even at the town level. Go to the Cape Cod Commission website and try to, it's a nice website, it's well designed, but just try. Like, who has time to say, I'm going to go multi-levels of government to weigh in about implications on what's going to go on in.
And that's kind of my point.
Yeah,
They
it's really
designed it that way so that you say, oh my God, there's like 15 subcommittees involved in this.
It's really
One
hard.
thing you can do is talk to the person who you vote for.
I see Betty Lucky. Oh, I'm sorry. I see Betty Lucky.
Yeah, Betty's on.
Oh, yeah, that's Betty, Betty, go ahead. Yeah. Patty, can you unmute?
Oh, she wants to talk?
Her hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what the gentleman in the back said. The Cape Cod Commission, I always ask the question, no one has the answer. How is the Cape Cod Commission committee formed? Nobody knows. I've heard they're volunteers, but they didn't just raise their hand and show up there. They're not elected. And as far as I've seen, there's no inspector general process for the Cape Cod Commission. They have no need to answer to anyone. Nobody has a check and balance on the Cape Cod Commission. And as Heather beautifully pointed out, this regional policy plan has become the dominant plan. And I went to a series of stakeholder meetings where the Barnstable Land Trust put forth a very reasonable proposition. And I won't name the individual, but this individual was associated with the Housing Assistance Corporation, and Heather did a beautiful job talking about that. And I have never seen a public official that angry in a public meeting when there was some discussion that this regional policy plan would be disrupted. Obviously, that has been written in such a way that they like it. And I think it's important to us to have an input on that regional policy plan. And I believe I'm an elected official, we all need to question the role of the Cape Cod Commission, and they need to answer to somebody. They absolutely do. And we need greater transparency in their processes. And I agree with Heather. Their website has absolutely gorgeous plans. I've looked at their place type tool. And if you don't know what a place type is, the Community Activity Center is probably on the hierarchy of place types. The tool is quite clever, but it's a tool. And it's not necessarily what we want. And it came up in the discussion of 35 Scudder that there were perhaps some inaccuracies in the tool, and they didn't want to hear anything about that. They said nothing can change. Everything is static. The regional policy plan rules all. So again, the gentleman in the back is spot on. There's something that needs to be done there because everything is supposed to flow from their processes, and we need greater transparency, and we need to understand who those subcommittee representatives are and how they're there and what their role is. Thank you.
So, one takeaway then might be to ask for a community discussion about whether the community has an interest in the LCP conforming with that regional. Because I don't think that question's ever been posed.
Before you go, I just want to say, for people who don't know, Betty Lucky is a town councilor from Precinct 3. Go ahead.
I would just like to echo the comments about working with our elected officials. As someone who has been trying to do so now since August, I find it extremely impossible to get any sort of reaction. They meet on Zoom. Briefly stopped meeting on Zoom. I think I heard that they're back on Zoom, but the one time I was allowed to speak to town council, I was given 3 minutes to talk. And then I was followed by about 10 other people talking about, any number of things. And then late in the meeting, they voted 11-0 to allow Mr. Els to start working on a host community agreement with Avangrid, paying no attention to my single little comment that was allowed. So, and then, you write to every counselor and hear from none. I just want to say it's very, very important that we get this council and the appointed administrators in the town to start remembering who they work for, because it seems to me that they've completely forgotten that. Thank you.
Mr. Paul, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I would say, as far as this goes right here, that was a great presentation. I have no interest in voting for supporting greater density in our village. And we're not gonna have it be foisted on us by somebody else. I was very clear about that. No, that position for me has not changed one lick, despite what people have characterized, or I'd say mischaracterized about my position on this. I think we're all in this village for very similar reasons in regard to how extraordinary it is. We all have a sense for the scale of it, like how the buildings work together, the history of the place, and the way it fits into the local, you know, the flora, the fauna, the whole place works really well. That's why we're here. I have no intention to allow a group of unelected folks at the Cape Cod Commission, who I really do hold at arm's length, because I don't really fully, like the rest of the folks in this room, I'm gonna, you know, embrace my ignorance. I don't fully understand how it is that their authority is vested.
The legislature.
Yeah, right, they do the appointments. And so I have no interest. In fact, the opposite. The conversations that I have, including a question that was pointed very clearly at the planning department on last Thursday night's vote, when the vote actually went down for the change in Hyannis zoning. I asked our planning director and the two assistants there that they had underscored that this is not an exportable notion that is being looked at being taken to other villages. That was on the record as the part of last Thursday night's meeting. Actually, the only question I've asked so far since I've been on the town council. Hold on one sec, Gail, I'll definitely get to you.
I just want to
Okay.
ask a question
Sure.
about what you said the other night. Were you satisfied with the answer that you got from planning development? She said, told you absolutely nothing.
Yeah, but I've had meetings with her. There is no plan.
But
I know you have these quotes.
Yeah, but it-
I know, but
She
I'm not
didn't
having
get back to
conversations
you.
with
She just-
anybody who's pointedly saying to me that this is something that is coming to Osterville. Now, there is a function in there that you said, I think, is under the LCP's action plan. If in their action plan, it includes something like, oh, you have to increase density for this LCP to be, you know, approved by the Cape Cod Commission, that is something that I would get in the middle of and make sure that that's not part of the action plan that represents the voice of Osterville. There's nobody who I'm talking with who is interested in 3, 4, 5 unit buildings. There's nobody interested in creating a zoning regime within Osterville's entire village boundaries that is based off of taking the ideas that have been promulgated and will be effective soon in Hyannis to this village. And so that conversation has happened. I guess there's the proof. Heather, you guys submit it. I'm not participating in those conversations. I have zero interest in it. I would like to take actions to clean up our zoning as it presently stands. Have you guys read through the list of like economic activities that you can do in Osterville? It's hilarious. It's from the 18th or 19th century. It's, you know, it's about blacksmiths and making, shoes for horses. Seriously. Okay, good point. Maybe it should be in there. Anyways, it needs to be cleaned up. And I would propose that we look at something like capping variances by height in the village of Osterville. And I have proposed that in conversations that I've had with our planning department and the rest of the professional leadership of town council, both on the town council leadership as well as the professional staff. My interest is not to freeze frame this place in one space, in one time, in one history. But I think there is a common acceptance of how this place looks and works and feels. And I would do nothing to threaten that. I would only promote us protecting.
Could you talk to the council being more responsive to the citizens of Barnstable? It's just really hard for people, huge numbers of people who feel one way to get this across to the council.
Yeah.
It's, can you speak to that?
Yeah.
What?
I know how you're talking, and you talked about it before. Couldn't agree more with you. But I guess it's refreshing, Paul. We're not having a Zoom conversation.
Yeah.
I think everyone's
Yeah.
pretty pleased with that. But I also think too, that this is a unique opportunity with fairly consistent opinion and mindset where you can talk directly to, the voters and, get your ideas, make it clear, make it crystal clear what you're standing for. And if I listen to what you said, what Suzanne has said, and how we're all trying to work together here, how can we best support you to represent more strongly to Barnstable our opposition to these things?
Yeah, well, it seems right now to me that the LCP is effectively the lever that is trying to get pulled, right? So the idea is that the Cape Cod Commission requires these 10-year regional plans by the 15 towns of the Cape. And then you get that deal of whatever you get, the technical assistance. And the way that they do it is they try to make the lever be the creation of your local LCP. And that LCP has our village designated as a CAC, a Communities Activity Center. Well, if you want your LCP to be accepted by them, then you have to include this idea that CACs would be a place in which you would want to change to higher or denser zoning, density zoning. And I would say that we just have to make it abundantly clear to, our village, there's 17 members of the actual LCP committee. 4 of them are from this village. 1 of them is in this room, maybe more than 1. And so those folks need to hear that we don't have any intention of participating in their requirement that the LCP includes our acceptance as a CAC designation by the commission, in which we would have to change our zoning laws to be more dense and be very clear with that. And that puts a kibosh on it. But I don't know if you could go back to
That I have, like that, it leaves me just to say, who is driving the bus? Right, because here we have a town planner saying, here's a strategy to put out a plan that includes a strategy to tag Osterville as high priority for density development. It's in writing.
Yeah.
With a town seal on it, like over and over and over. So it's really hard for residents to just see this multi-year repeated mantra from the planning director, who says, hey, and by the way, I've been working with the Cape Cod Commission on the density framework. And for community activity centers. And now we got to go comply with what I worked on. And in this plan, I'm going to point to that plan. Right? And in this plan, I'm going to say, oh gosh, I got to comply with that plan. And it's all like 4 little people over here saying we want density. So, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Again, just to wrap up my perspective on that, is how, I think this is kind of apparent what the sentiment in the room is. How can the people who are motivated enough to come out at night and attend the meeting specifically support you in spending some of these things off that are not in anybody's interest?
yeah, so I think this conversation right now is a kickoff of an effort to actually have us take a look at zoning in Osterville, which only has 2 designations effectively, and then actually upgrade it. So A, it looks like the 21st century that we're in, and B, takes proactive steps to keep us from ever having to revisit this in the future. And one way is capping, especially variances by height. That's a version of something that's not low hanging fruit, but something that we could do in a relatively short order, and then sort of insulate ourselves from effectively having buildings that would be retail or residential that are going over 2 stories within the downtown core, for instance. And so that is, yeah. So I don't have any specific recommendation to you, sir, about like how to support it, but I think LCP making it clear. So Jen, who I'm pointing to right here, is one of our appointees from the village on the LCP. And they need to know clearly that we're not going to play by this. And I think we probably get support, or I pretty much guarantee, because I've had these sort of conversations with the folks in Barnstable Village, which has also gotten this CAC designation, and they're not going to be, going for that. Hey.
Hi. I don't know. Maybe I'm comfortable with that or not. Brian introduced you twice. How can we help you as our council so that this doesn't happen?
Yeah.
I don't want to hear ACP, but how can we help you so this doesn't happen?
You clearly made that point. So like, yeah. Well, if you have a good recommendation, great.
Paul, can I help you?
Yeah, sure.
I went to that meeting on Thursday night. I walked up and introduced.
Yeah.
Anyways, not once did I hear anything on the Thursday night meeting bring up Osterville or any of the other villages in terms of, this push that's being discussed there for like 45 minutes or so. But a way to save everyone a lot of agony here is there not a way to invite the 1 or 2 or 3 of the Cape Cod Commission people, the town planners, we know who they are, invite the manager, rent, the OVA can rent the gym at Cape Cod Academy, or go rent the room over at the junior high school.
Yeah.
Have a big meeting right here and have everyone just hone in just like you're doing right now. And if that doesn't fly, where they don't come here, somebody discussed just a short bit ago about they only got 3 minutes, to make that speech in front of the counselors, in front of you.
Yep.
Well, what if, I don't know, there's 60 people in this room, 60 times 3 is 180. That's 3 hours. All 60 people come to the town councilor meeting under other comments and then let it fly. Okay, so that's what they get if they don't come and listen to you. So
Yeah.
I don't understand why there needs to be something. And this sewer is so far down the road from making it to Osterville. This is, I don't want to say this is a dog and pony show, but I think it doesn't have to happen. I mean, you can nip it in the bud in a far easier way. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Okay.
Paul, I was at that meeting too, and I heard you ask that question,
Oh, yeah.
and that was a firm no for Osterville.
Yeah.
John,
Right.
John,
Is it no? Yeah.
hey, John, Bill Cutcliffe.
About zoning. The beach is zoned recreation. So why is that being allowed? It's not been rezoned for industrial zone. So what is happening here? It's all a joke. Number one. And I do recall looking up about Cape Cod Commission, and because I researched them, I tried to call them and they finally answered the phone. And I finally got a fax number out of them to fax my opposition to this project. And it took a lot of finding out who they were. And it was started by Dukakis. And he appointed the commission. And I wrote to the governor and I told him they're not acting in the best interest of Cape Cod. So they should be disbanded, which they can be. So they were just appointed and started by Dukakis to preserve Cape Cod. You know, this is what's happening.
That's their mission.
So it's all political. And the biggest thing that is the danger here is our aquifer. They're going, it's 30 feet out. They want, our underground water goes out into the sea there. And there's a high risk they're gonna pierce it when they try to put these cables in, which have never been tested, never used in the United States with high voltage energy. So right away, that alone is a no. There's no way of getting around the no. We're not going to be the lab rats for an energy company. And there will be increased cancer rates. Look what happened at Pay Pause, with what's happened in Otis Air Force Base. We've been here a long time, 40 years. And I've been to meetings with that Jenkins girl, because I have an office building in Hyannis. And they wanted to redo that 10 years ago. And they wanted to put a rotary. And we're saying, how are they, this is a hospital zone. You can't put a rotary trying to get to the hospital. So, you know, they don't know what they're doing. And she's, I believe, hired by you. She works for the town. Does she not? The planning board is.
The planning director, yeah.
Is hired. Well, they can be fired. You know, you're working out. So I'm getting tired of the runaround because they're still not talking about the right things. And I called up Senator Markey's office in Washington, and I brought his director, who's coming to the next meeting. His name is Ben, I believe it's Harris. Yeah. And had a long conversation with him about the push here to save the waterways. It's all about getting the sewers. And we all know it needs to have sewers. And he told me, matter of fact, that the money is there for the federal government with this bill to put in the sewers throughout the whole Cape Cod. So just, I told him it's no reason why it should be a local issue. This is a regional, state, federal issue that you allow this contamination, and it should not be the burden of the individual people. Not everybody who lives in Osterville is a multimillionaire, and I expect action. He said the money's there. Well, why isn't it being used? I'll take the sewer any day, but I'm not taking those cables.
John,
I think Bill Cutcliffe is on, would like to ask a question. Bill, you're on Zoom.
yeah, I want to make a statement rather than a question for knowledge. I got really interested in studying the Cape Cod Commission relative to the Beach Club about 8 months ago. It's very fascinating. Now, one thing that hasn't been said in that there are 14 directors, and one of them represents Osterville. And it's very strange because when I studied their website, one of the things said that we don't want anybody talking to a representative. We don't want any representative to hear anything that other people on the Cape Cod Commission do not hear. So do not contact your representative. They get so upset. I spent so much time that they spotted that I was on their website that they actually they took some things down that they saw that I was taking screenshots of. So number one, I think we should find out who that representative is. It's easy enough. And I think we should ask them to come. They're a very, very challenging entity, and it's well known. For example, one of our lead realtors, that I won't use his name at the moment, said if you get involved in the Cape Cod Commission, it's $100,000 guaranteed that you'll have to do to defend yourself if even if fortunate. And so I think we really should study them, because one of the things when the planner was there, which really disturbed me very much, it was said that the Cape Cod Commission is going to develop the zoning plan, if I heard correctly, and Heather would, and you other people know better, but we're in lockstep with them. They are going to develop the X, Y, and Z, and the town the planning group is going to be in lockstep with them. So I really think we should bear down, and they get $10 million from our tax dollars every year to spend any way they want, and they're very, very woke, and so I think we really have to. I would highly recommend we find out who that representative is and see if he will come out of the woodwork, and we could reach out to him.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Back in the back, sir.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, there's something as big as this, and so many people are interested. And I pass it on to the town council. The town council should have a special meeting where people can come. You can't have to go to a town. They're all on Zoom all the time. You can't go down and say your piece. If they had a special meeting, people could go and voice both sides of the opinion. And I'll say why the 3-minute rule. It goes back to Gary Brown. Too many people were tying the meeting up. They would never get any other business done at the town council meeting if they let these people keep talking. But if you have a special meeting, they could allow people to talk more, maybe 3 minutes at a time, but come back and add to it. So if you got any voice at all, that may be the way to go.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, and so on the Zoom stuff, just so folks know, the Commonwealth has allowed until the end of March for any legislative elected body in the Commonwealth to continue to hold Zoom or hybrid meetings through the end of March. And then primarily what people are saying is that will lapse at the end of March, and there'll be a requirement for everything to go back in person.
They allow it, but they don't require it, right, Paul?
Right, yeah. And so the town council meetings there has been one town council meeting this year that has been held in Zoom to make sure that we could get the quorum to vote on stuff, because somebody had a pre-existing reason to be out of town, and then there was enough recusals on the issue that it was like, all right, then the person could do it, they just can't be here in Barnstable. And so we've done it once that way, but the town council meetings themselves have zero plans to be on Zoom at all.
So you started with the Zoom?
I mean, no, it's still an option. It's a hybrid, so it's still an option. It's just saying after. Sorry, what's saying?
It's an option, but what is the Barnstable Town Council doing? Are you gonna do away with Zoom? Are all the meetings being held in person?
I think the plan is after March 30th to go back to in person. Yeah.
We have issues.
Well, they are in person right now. It's just we're also offering the option of the hybrid, so people can
Okay,
Zoom
so
if they
they
want.
are in person now.
There has been one.
60 people in this room can go to the next.
Yeah,
meeting.
2 people right in the back left corner have mentioned the fact that they were there and we interacted there. So like there was a meeting last Thursday.
Oh, so the meetings are live, Paul.
Yes, yeah. And there was one this year, and then we're only in
The town
February.
should
So
publicize that.
yeah.
Okay, Jen, do you have something
No,
to say?
I'm gonna stick to the 3-minute rule because I know that we're going long here. Jennifer Williams, member of the OVA board, member of the OVPA steering committee, and also a member of the local comprehensive planning committee, the LCPC. Sounds like alphabet soup. But the issue is that I am a resident of Osterville. I run the Osterville Historical Museum, the Osterville Farmers Market, and I live in Osterville and have 4 children that are being raised right here in Osterville. And I think from that background alone, the issue of preservation of what makes this village so special to each and every one of us is clearly my focus. And I can tell you that in the LCPC meetings that we've had so far, I have not heard one word about changing any of that in Osterville. And I would welcome anyone to show up for our meetings, the LCPC. If you go to the town website, that we meet at least once a month. It's all open and public. It's in person. And if you go to that website, you can also click to send your thoughts. All of you make a difference. All of you can reply to the purple dots at the bottom of Heather's presentation just by sending your email message in, because it matters. Everyone's voice matters. There is no finalized LCPC report or anything like that. We are still in outreach mode, so that tonight, for example, there was at 7 o'clock a fisherman's meeting that was going on, and there are many LCPC members who are there now. So it's still all up to us to make our voices heard. And the way to do it is show up at our LCPC meetings or send that email, super easy, or swing by the museum. I'm happy to chat with anyone, see how I can help. But clearly, preservation of this village, I think what we've learned tonight and what we've known all along is at the heart and core values of what we all want for Osterville. And together as a community, we can make that happen. So.
I'd like to respond to that. Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. If you look at the makeup of the LCPC, other than Jen and some other people, it was purposely staffed for business and interest and chamber interest and this kind of thing. So, you know, I wouldn't be naive about thinking that these things will come up, okay? And the majority is already there behind this kind of activity, okay? Because that's the way it was put together. A number of people put names in there, myself, Bob Schulte, Heather Hunt, weren't even given interviews. Heather got an interview, okay? And some of the people on there, they don't have the experience to be on there. But it was the town manager put that together. And if you know what's going on in town and who the players are, it's full of players. So I wouldn't for 1 minute think that the LCPC is not going to come out with something that's going to be similar to what we're saying. Okay, so we need to be on top of that LCPC all times. Okay, because you'll see the same people who are in charge of the planning board, in charge of, you know, all these committees, and most of them are tied in either personally or financially with what's going on in the town. And that is very scary. And we brought that up numerous times with the town council president, town manager, yet we still have a town that's loaded with personal and people with financial interests. Okay, so I'm glad you're doing the best you can. We'll be watching it very closely. Anybody else have some comment?
Betty does.
Betty, are you back? Unmute?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just wanted to speak to a couple of comments that were made there. The representative for the town of Barnstable to the Cape Cod Commission is a gentleman named Fred Shiragodes. He was a former town councilor. I have no idea how long he's been our representative. I don't know how he's been appointed. I don't know what the duration of the appointment, but it's Fred Shiragodes. I want to say he was even maybe a past president of the Barnstable Town Council. So that is our guy. To the gentleman in the back that talked about, having voices heard. I will say that the Save Twin Works organization circulated a petition calling for a meeting of the voters. There are 3 ways that are written in the town charter of the town of Barnstable to address citizens' needs. One of them is a meeting of the voters. I want to say you need between 400 and 500 wet signatures, registered voters, and you will be given a meeting of the voters. And that is when you, the voters, can control the meeting at the town council. So there are things in the town charter that you can do.
Thank you. Thank you, Betty. thank Heather for putting.
Can I just, because it would be great. Like if everything I said is wrong, it would be so excellent. And it would be great to never talk about it again, right?
Yes.
So one thing we could do maybe as a takeaway, well, one thing is to follow up on what Jen recommended, right? And get in touch and all that. Another thing is it would be most excellent to have our town planner come here. And if it's true that everything that's in words, verbal, video, writing, plans is somehow false, we should talk about that and put it behind us. Right?
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll do this bigger meeting at a place and have a question, do you all want to comply with the Cape Cod Regional Commission plan? Or whatever it is.
Or do you want cables at Dows's Beach?
Right, right.
But I think Heather has done a great job in putting the whole picture. Town agreed to have the cables come on our beach, the cables come on the beach, pay for the line that wasn't going to go through the center of Osterville for sewage. Okay, up until the plan in December 2020, changed a month later when the town started talking to Avangrid about landing on the beach. Okay, that wasn't coming up through. Town wants to identify our villages. The way to identify the villages, you gotta have sewage. Okay, sewage in the plan. So it's this whole thing has been brewing and put together for a long period of time. It's important we understand where this is coming from. Okay, and it's all tied together in a bunch of different forms. And there's a number of people who would like to see this happen here. It's a small percentage of the people who live in this town. But like I said, many of them have ulterior motives and personal interests in what's going on. And that's one of the problems I see in our town government. But thank you for Heather. If you're all interested, Heather will be on the Baptist Mayor Show this Sunday just to talk about exactly this from 12 to 1 on Sunday at WFDK. Thanks. So thank you, Heather, for doing that. I'd like to go now to town council report, Paul.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think we covered a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Not all of it. Hey, but I do want to draw folks' attention before we lose too much of the room. Oh, you guys live in Falmouth, correct? Yeah, right, yeah. So this is one that, you know, I might, because I can't fully explain it yet, but what was partially mentioned a little bit earlier is what's called a debt exclusion vote. That was for the very first time presented in 2 town council meetings ago, which is effectively about trying to pay for the next 5 years worth of sewer costs in the vicinity of $300 million worth of around a dozen or 15 different projects that would be that phase, and $300 million. So it's being discussed as a potential town-wide vote that would happen this fall. And then it would be followed. I think everybody might know in this room that all 13 of the town councilors are up for re-election this November. So if people are interested in running, if people are interested in like promoting other people in other villages, all 13 seats are up for reconsideration this November. But what might precede that is could be a contentious vote on, you know, effectively coming up with a debt exclusion vote for the cost, namely, okay, $300 million spread over these years to that would need to be financed, and then how much each individually we would be assessed to effectively pay for that. The dollar amounts on a monthly or quarterly level don't look awful for a median priced home in Barnstable. And so it will be pitched to us as something like, we're going to have to effectively increase costs of living here for a bit until this sewer happens. And this is the first one of these debt exclusion votes. And we're looking at it for September of this year. I feel like folks might be familiar with the debt exclusion vote that was done for the vocational schools, which was the last one regionally that passed. I think there was generally consensus that there was a need to pay for, you know, dramatically improving the facilities in which, you know, high school students are getting education in the trades, and folks voted for it, and they increased their tax bill in the process. And this will be potentially a similar process that I need to probably be able to say something more substantive about maybe next meeting. But I also taxes are a pain in our ass, right? And having them sneak up on us is worse than like just talking about it right now. but it is definitely something that's on the horizon and it's directly tied with the CWMP and the costs for doing the next big push after what you're seeing effectively a lot at the corner of like Finney's Lane and 28 and stuff, which is the epicenter of the work that's going on now. But this would be effectively trying to come up with the funding to pay to get the sewer effectively through the intersection where like Mahoney's and Pizza One Subs 2 is. And so that portion of the branch is what we'd be discussing funding, and that's what we're talking about. And the vote would be in September. And the idea would be, I think, if we finished out all 30 years of the comprehensive wastewater management plan, something that we will have to do every 5 years.
You better call Senator Markey then.
Okay.
He's already said the money's there.
So the Inflation Reduction Act has been looked up and down. Yeah.
I don't understand why any of the people are talking for that money.
Yeah, no, I'd say that there's a considerable amount of brain share that's pointed directly towards the issue to make sure that as much federal, state, county money is coming in to support the cost of it. So as little of it as possible ends up with the citizen. So, I mean, I think the Inflation Reduction Act has been analyzed up and down, left ways and sideways. And,
so you can ask them directly.
oh yeah, the staffer though, right? Not the senator, I don't know, right? The senator. Yeah, great. Yeah. And, there's been some citizens around here who've gotten other members of local staff to show up. So there have been, Kip Diggs has come to some stuff and representatives of the congressional delegation and State Senator Sear and stuff. But, a bunch of these things are decisions that are made in two other capitals. They're not necessarily made in the capital of Cape Cod, but in Boston and DC.
Okay. Your current view on that is that might, and again, be rough, of your understanding of the process, that might come September-ish.
I felt like it was what they would propose is the first Tuesday in September. Yes, sir.
I heard it was for fiscal year 25 though, Paul. Is that changed?
As in, maybe that's when the funds actually,
Right.
what they're voting on are funds that would be in the fiscal year
Right.
25 budget. Yes.
Right, okay.
Right. But we're already we're in fiscal year 24. Right?
So it's all on top of the recent tax increases.
Yes, so your property tax rate went down, but not everybody, but in particularly this village, the valuations are high to begin with, and valuations went up dramatically when on the year that they were assessed was 21. And so if you look at your rate actually went down, but everybody went up seemingly from the people I'm talking about, it's $1,000, but a lot more. I know that.
Okay, so on top of that, the debt solution is on top of the massive hike in taxes.
Yeah. Okay, so 2.5 override is
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the 2.5 override.
Yeah.
It's to pay a debt.
Yeah.
When they need to borrow money to do.
But I just want to be clear, sir, that the tax rate, though, we did drop and vote on dropping the tax rate, but everybody's home in America has been effectively assessed. That's where.
Dropping the rate versus the check that we write, I don't think.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
If you have the vote, and it's turned down, the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question.
John, this is directed to Paul.
Yeah, sure.
Just in regards to sewer, and I'm not an engineer, my friend, okay? But anyways, is this not a possible win-win? And I do not know what the sewer infrastructure plan looks like to feed Osterville, but I know there's realtors in the room, and I would assume 80% of the people in the room know that sewers are necessary to some degree in Osterville to solve all the watershed issues and so on.
Yeah.
But assuming that it's like a grade A, large infrastructure plan, is there a way to look at reducing the scale of that push so that it's a much more modest, and the sewer expansion to Osterville isn't for growth, but it's more to just manage the watershed difficulties with all the Title V troubles that everyone may be paying for if something's not done. But all I'm suggesting is there not a way to look at re-engineering everything down?
Yeah.
That'll help solve Helen's and, everyone else's concern. Forget the fact that it's a long time away, but that aside, let's just, Is that?
Yeah, so baked into the ordinance, yes, yeah, so baked into the ordinance is a 5-year review. To make sure that we're not just pressing play on a 30-year plan and it's just gonna unspool itself until 30 years are done every 5 years. So it will be up for review, including, an assessment of whether or not innovative alternative septic systems are increasing their capacity at a rate that make that more intriguing to us than centralized sewer.
I'm just suggesting you scale it down now though, and then that'll help soften everyone's worries about, overdevelopment and Osterville.
Sure, yeah. Well, in none of the conversation that I've been privy to in regards to sewering Osterville has anything to do with growth. Every conversation I have that I participate in, that I hear, is completely about eutrophication. It's entirely about nitrogen and phosphorus. It is not some Trojan horse to get into the village and blow the caps off the zoning and make this place look like Nantucket. There's just, I hear that people talking about it. It's just like,
You understand my point though, because we just spoke about.
We just talked about it. It's all right there on the.
okay.
Everything you saw for the last half an
I'm talking about the village of, but I also got up and told you exactly everything that I was participating in. In the conversations, there is a breakdown and also leadership changes. And so, there was a period of time that our town council had a very specific look, feel, and smell to it. And it had a direction and it had known leadership, and it was pretty clear. That leadership has passed. There is new leadership, and it sometimes takes a while, I think, for that leadership's new priorities to filter through the system, and we're seeing it filter through. And I think it's away from a lot of the worst case scenario stuff that has been in this conversation about changing the zoning for Osterville. Whether or not that was going in way before I was around in this role, that's possible.
Can I just say that I did this and I work, right? I don't work on this. I actually take nighttime time to do this. And I put that together so that it's in black and white from our town hall, right? It's a January presentation from our planning director saying, here's the purple dot, 3 of them on Osterville. So it's just such a misalignment from nobody wants that to this town seal on a piece of paper in January saying high density focus in Osterville. So I really think we need the people who produce those documents to come talk to us.
Again, and this is contemporaneous. This is contemporaneous. This isn't 5 years ago. This is contemporaneous.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'd like to respond to you. I think you hit the point. Okay. Everything we've seen here is that they want the density. They want the sewer to increase density. And they want it because it's going to bring a lot more connections, money spent in development, and more tax dollars to the town.
John, what I just said ties into the whole conversation about bringing the people here.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever format, whatever legal charter you have to do, and just drive it home together.
And the other thing is,
that's my point.
this 2.5 override, okay, I would advise people not to vote for it unless they come up beforehand and say, unequivocally, we are abandoning these plans to densify these small villages, period. Okay, I believe in putting the sewage. I would vote for it if that's the case, but I don't believe that's what they're trying to do. Okay, and there's a disconnect here from a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think there's a disconnect in this room.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's a disconnect about what the town is saying and then what everybody's thinking was not going to happen, but it's saying in black and white. And this is contemporary. Her presentation isn't 3 years old, it's contemporary. Okay, so that's what we're talking. Anyway, well set?
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody other
Unless
questions?
somebody has some.
Okay, this is going on long. I just want to say that Heather will be on 12 to 1 discussing some of these issues. I think I just want to go into the new business. Our next meeting is March 7th. That's our next OVA meeting. And is there any comment that people want to make before we call it a night?
Thank you.
Patrick Johnson from Abington.
Thanks, John. I just want to let folks know that we're gonna have a rig over the culvert on the Dowson's Beach Causeway next Tuesday, the 14th, starting around 8 a.m. We're gonna be investigating the pavement and the amount of rock above the actual culvert between the current pavement to the top of the culvert. Just giving you permission to do that. Sure. The Barnstable Conservation Commission, the town's Director of Community Services, and the town DPW department. The town DPW.
contract, so what gives you the allowance to do this?
Oh, we're doing investigatory work about,
Oh,
If you don't get the contract, some other company would be doing that. Can you address that, Paul? How are they allowed to go ahead with this?
Yeah, I don't, so they're in a permitting process. The company has yet to relinquish their interest in getting this, with it.
they are not in this committee to begin. They're in regulatory. They're in review, that's a little different
Okay.
than permitting.
Yeah.
It is.
I don't know about that designation, Pat. I don't know if you do, but yeah.
Would you look into this and find out how this is happening?
Okay, but I think just to scope this thing, I mean, we're talking about a half day's work. Where I know it doesn't.
Complete access to the beach.
Yeah, one,
Recording us
yeah,
while
yeah.
this is happening.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that, yeah.
Whatever happens. I was talking, believe me, I was.
I think they're in the permitting process, right? And they're trying to figure out how to get on above the.
No contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
We won't have access to the beach.
Even answer my email, asking the town to disallow this work because of.
Yeah, we talked about that, with Mark.
You didn't even answer my email.
Yeah, well, I talked with Mark and the town manager.
And then all of a sudden, just ignore her?
No, the town manager Ellis has responded to you.
No one has responded to me,
I
including
read that
Mr.
email
Ellis.
today.
I CC'd Mr. Ellis. You didn't respond to me.
Yeah.
And
I
we
just
don't
knew
want
I'd see
this
you tonight.
company around for a number of reasons that I stated. They're in court fighting DPU. They have no Hills Community Agreement with us.
Correct.
They had reneged on their signed contracts. We've had no public input into this company coming into Delson's Beach whatsoever. I forgot the last reason I gave you, but I wrote the email. I actually posted it on Facebook as well. I wrote to every counselor, not one person took the time to respond to me. And I really expected a response from our representative on the council. We don't want these people around. We're gonna fight them tooth and nail.
These people pass right here.
I don't care. I don't care. It does not live in Osterville.
Yeah. I don't know, I think, yeah.
But I think the email you're talking about, I did see it.
Yeah.
It was another individual that wrote that, not.
Okay.
Right, I know what you're saying. He did respond to another person, the town man.
thank you, John. I'm here afterwards if anybody wants to have questions about it. The next open house game is on February 23rd at 5 p.m. here in the library. Look forward to discussing that.
Okay. Thank you for all coming tonight, especially staying here. These are important